And welcome to another Mr. Carter Science Special. In this video we'll be looking at the blood vessels. By the end of the video all of you will be able to understand the structure of arteries, veins and capillaries and relate their structure to the function of those blood vessels. The first thing that it's very important for you to understand is that in humans we have a double circulatory system. Other animals, for example fish, will only have a single circulatory system, but humans have a double circulatory system, and what that means is that the blood will flow through the heart twice on its journey around the body. First, the heart will pump and send the blood out of the aorta and towards the cells of the body, the muscle cells, the brain cells, etc. And in those cells the oxygenated blood will lose its oxygen as the oxygen diffuses out into the body cells for use in respiration. So the deoxygenated blood then will flow back into the right hand side of the heart to be pumped and squeezed to gain a little bit more blood pressure and be sent to the lungs so that the deoxygenated blood can then pick up oxygen, and after that, after it's gone, the blood has flowed through the alveoli and through all the capillaries in the lungs. It's got a very low blood pressure, so it needs to increase the blood pressure so that the blood can reach all the different parts of the body again. So the blood will leave the lungs and it will flow back into the heart, into the left hand side of the heart, where the blood is squeezed again by the heart, which increases the blood pressure so that the blood can be sent around the body again. So the blood flows twice through the heart as the blood flows just once around the body. Another thing to notice about the blood is that oxygenated blood will be bright red and deoxygenated blood is actually dark red. Now you may see on the diagrams like the one I've got in front of you that the deoxygenated blood is often shown as being blue, and this is just so you can see the difference on the diagram. But you may say, well, what about my veins? My veins seem blue. Well, yes, the tube itself may have a blue colour to it, and the tissue that makes up the vein may have a blue colour to it, but the liquid, the blood that flows through it, is actually of dark red when it is deoxygenated. So what do arteries, veins and capillaries do? Well, arteries will carry blood away from the heart, and you can think of that as saying an artery carries blood away from the heart. And almost all arteries will carry oxygenated blood. However, there is one artery which will carry deoxygenated blood, and you can see I've shown you that on my little diagram here by showing you the blue artery coming away from the heart and going towards the lungs, carrying that deoxygenated blood. Veins will carry blood into the heart. Veins carry blood in to the heart, and you can see the word in within the word vein to help remind you. And veins will generally be carrying deoxygenated blood, apart from one particular example, which is the pulmonary vein, which carries the blood from the lungs into the heart and therefore carries oxygenated blood. The capillaries are arguably the most important blood vessels in your body, because it's in the capillaries as the blood flows from the artery to the veins through the tissues of the body that blood will change from oxygenated to deoxygenated. And this is because the oxygen diffuses into the tissue cells for use in respiration. And carbon dioxide, which is made in respiration, will diffuse out of the tissue cells and into the blood plasma to be carried back to the lungs so it can be excreted. So here we can see in a little bit more detail that double circulatory system of the humans, and it's important for your course that you understand the names of several of the major blood vessels. For example, around the kidneys down here we have the renal artery carrying oxygenated blood away from the heart and towards the kidney, and the renal vein which carries the deoxygenated blood back up to the heart and away from the kidney, renal being the Latin word for kidney. And we have a similar thing when we look at the liver here. In the liver we have the hepatic artery carrying the blood towards the liver away from the heart, and a hepatic vein carrying the blood, the deoxygenated blood, back up to the heart away from the liver. But the liver is unique in that it has two vein systems. It also has the hepatic portal vein, which, as you can see on the diagram here, carries the blood straight from the digestive system into the liver, and that's so that any toxins, any alcohol that may have been ingested can be broken down by the liver straight away before it can damage any of the cells of the body. And then the final veins and arteries that you really need to know about from this diagram are the pulmonary vein and the pulmonary artery, and they're the only two that have the opposite way around. The pulmonary artery, as you can see here, is carrying the blood away from the heart and towards the lungs, and therefore it's an artery because it's carrying blood away from the heart, but that blood is deoxygenated. The pulmonary vein is going back into the heart, but it's going away from the lungs, and therefore it's carrying oxygenated blood. And the Latin word for lungs is pulmonary, so anything to do with the lungs you will hear the word pulmonary used a lot. Just pause the video at a moment, see whether or not you can answer this exam question. So name the types of the blood vessels labelled A, B and C. Well, the key to this is to identify the heart here and look for the arrows. The arrows here are flowing away from the heart, so as we get down towards blood vessels A must be an artery because the blood is going away from the heart. And if we follow that blood flowing around, it flows in this case straight through the gut, where we've got the smallest of our blood vessels there, where the blood is changing from oxygenated to deoxygenated, so that will be a capillary. And then following the arrows on the diagram, the arrows are now travelling back up towards the heart, where we have our blood vessels C. So C must be a vein because the blood is flowing into the heart. So arteries, veins and capillaries all have a different function, and to carry out their different functions they have different structures to help them. Arteries, as we've already said, carry blood away from the heart, and that blood needs to be at very high pressure. To help the blood have that high pressure so it can be flow around the body all the way to the tips of your fingers, down to the bottom of your toes, the top of your head, to help maintain that high blood pressure, the arteries will have a very narrow lumen. Now if you look at the diagram here at the top, you can see the artery here, and I can measure the space where the blood flows through the center of that tube, and the center of any tube is known as a lumen. So in an artery you will have a very narrow lumen to maintain the high blood pressure, but you will also have thick muscle walls, and those muscle walls will stretch under pressure when the high pressure blood is flowing through them, and they will also contract as well to try and maintain that high blood pressure, and that's known as your pulse. So you have thick muscle walls which will stretch under pressure, and no valves in an artery because valves would slow the flow of the blood. In a vein, veins carry blood into the heart, and they have an incredibly wide lumen, very wide. It's not clear to see if you compare the two diagrams here, they're not to the same scale, but they have a very wide lumen, and in comparison to an artery, a relatively thin muscle wall, and this maintains the blood at a relatively low pressure. Now that gives veins a problem because the blood, for example, down in your feet has a very long distance to travel to get to your heart. How can that blood flow up? Well, to help the blood flow against the force of gravity, veins will have valves which make the blood flow in only one direction, and the muscles of your body, for example the calves in your leg or the biceps and triceps in your arm, will actually, when they contract, squeeze the veins themselves and squeeze the blood in the veins, forcing it up through the valves so that the blood in that way can travel back to the heart. Now, as I've mentioned before, the capillaries are possibly the most important blood vessel, and they carry blood from the arteries to the veins through the body's tissues. And they have an incredibly narrow lumen. In fact, the lumen is just one red blood cell thick. In fact, it's actually slightly smaller than the diameter of one red blood cell. And that means that the red blood cells have to slow down as they travel through the capillaries. And that allows time for oxygen to diffuse out of the hemoglobin in a red blood cell and into the body tissues for use in respiration. Capillaries also have a very large surface area, and again this allows for a fast rate of diffusion of both gases, oxygen out of the capillaries and carbon dioxide going into the capillaries, but also diffusion of nutrients like glucose and amino acids. They will also need to diffuse quickly out of the capillaries and into the body's tissue for use in chemical reactions like respiration. Capillaries also have a wall that is just one cell thick, incredibly thin wall for the capillaries. This gives a short distance for diffusion and again creates a fast rate of diffusion for all the different nutrients and waste chemicals that need to flow in and out, as well as carbon dioxide and oxygen. Let's look in a little bit more detail at the veins and how the blood flows back to the heart against the force of gravity. So veins will have valves, and you can see the valves here on these two diagrams. And veins will prevent the blood from flowing in the wrong direction. So blood can flow up through the valves, but then if the blood begins to flow with gravity and it flows backwards, it will then force those valves shut, and the valves will close and prevent the blood from flowing in the wrong direction. These valves are similar to valves that you find in the heart. However, you need to be able to force the blood up through the veins, and to do that you need to use the body's own muscles. The muscles in the wall of the vein are not strong enough and not thick enough to carry out this function, so you need to use the muscles, for example the calf muscles in your leg. Now these will surround the veins, and when the calf muscles contract as you move, they will push the blood up through the valves, and as the muscles then relax again, then the blood will settle down on top of the valves until the calf muscles contract again, forcing the blood up one more time. This is also a very important thing when you're sitting on an aeroplane. You will be advised, if you're taking a long flight, to make certain that you get up and move around to prevent a disease called DVT, deep vein thrombosis. Thrombosis means a blood clot. If you don't move the muscles in your legs, then the blood will just sit resting on top of the valves and it may eventually clot. That won't cause you too many problems while the blood clots in your leg, but if you get off the aeroplane, start moving again and the blood starts flowing again, that blood clot could flow to the coronary artery in your heart, or perhaps some of the blood vessels in your brain, and cause either heart attacks or strokes. So it's very important, if you're sitting on an aeroplane for a long period of time, that you move your legs around, even just a little bit as you're watching a film. Circulate your foot to get the muscles in your leg moving and get the blood flowing and circulating to prevent DVT. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please comment in the comment section and let me know what you've learnt. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can look out for more videos from Mr. Carter Science. Thank you very much for watching.